So it's a rest day for me today. I'm just going for a quick walk from the house to go and check the conditions to see if it's white enough to go and try a wee new route tomorrow. And while I was walking, I thought, actually, this is a good time to make a video about rest days and the content of rest days. On this channel, I've introduced an idea a few times about actively trying to improve the size of the response to your training. And a big part of that is the content of the rest, what people would refer to as the quality of your rest or your rest days. And so that's what this video is going to be about. And it was kind of prompted by a talk that I was giving recently about training in general. And someone asked a question afterwards that was really interesting. They asked me, should you stretch on your rest days? And I was a little bit confused at first. I said, well, you can do, you would stretch for flexibility training, and you could do that on your rest day or on your training day. I don't think it would really matter. And he clarified by saying, no, I was meaning, should you stretch in order to improve your recovery? And then I had to rephrase my answer because I was like, that's a much more interesting question. So yes, stretching can definitely improve the quality of your recovery, but probably not because of the actual stretching part. So I'll come back to the stretching part in just a moment, but the first thing to think about rest days is how many rest days to actually take in a given time period. Well, that of course it depends question. It depends on your training history, the amount of training you're doing currently, and the total amount of other stresses that you have to deal with in your life. In general, I would say most people who have been climbing for a good number of years and are reasonably fit should be climbing for between 3 and 6 times a week. I think that's quite a normal number. Obviously that's a big range. I personally climb 4 days a week most of the time if I'm training on my board back in the garage there. Occasionally I'll climb up to 7 days a week, but not all the time. I do take some rest days. Rest days are very good and I recommend them. So I would say as a very general point that a couple of rest days in a given week are going to be normal and sufficient for a lot of people. And there are going to be exceptions at both ends of the range. People who don't have a lot of training history, if they've not long started training, they might need to do 2 to 3 days climbing per week. So for every climbing day, you have 1 rest day, sometimes 2 rest days. And then as you start to get fitter and accommodate to doing more training, then you could actually reduce that rest and increase the training. But of course, it totally depends on how much training or activity or climbing you're actually doing on the active days. So this is always going to be a moving target. Then you've got the other end of the scale, people who are semi-professional or professional athletes who will train 7 days a week. They're in the climbing wall for several hours, 7 days a week. That's an extremely stressful thing to do to your body, and it takes a lot of building up to for, you know, if you're climbing hard on those sessions. I like to do quite long sessions with a lot of bouldering and doing endurance stuff as well, and then taking a rest day. So I'll climb like 1 day on, 1 day off, sometimes 2 days on, 1 day off. But I find that if I've been doing a lot on my board on the climbing wall, then sometimes I'll increase that a bit. And then at other times of the year, if I'm out trad climbing a lot, I'd have to decrease that. I couldn't just jump on my board and climb every day. That would soon break me. Now, can we see the back of Annick Beg yet? Not quite. I have to walk a little bit further, I think. So that's a comment on the number of rest days that are appropriate. You're going to have to decide that based on those parameters I just mentioned. I'll just cross the stream 1 second. The next thing then is the content of the rest days. What should they contain? Total rest, sitting on the couch, sitting at a computer, working, doing some sort of activity, doing things like stretching. Again, that's slightly dependent on what else you need to do in your life. I personally do need to spend a fair bit of time at a computer working, but whether that is actually useful in your rest day is dependent on both the type of work you're doing and how you feel about it. Because stress is one of these things that is very difficult to quantify, and what's stressful to one person can be renewing to another person. So stress is a slippery concept, but ultimately it is mediated by different mediators in the body, things like the classic stress hormone cortisol and many other processes which I won't get into in this video. I'm sure you'll have heard of the notion of the fight or flight response, which is the sympathetic nervous system being activated by a stressor, an acute stressor that ramps up adrenaline, cortisol, mobilizes glucose in your body. There's a whole host of metabolic actions to ramp everything up to help you deal with the stress. And that counts for physical and psychological stress. So if your rest day activity, which could be something like work, or it could be anything, taking care of family, doing all sorts of things in life, if that's a stressful activity that provokes a sympathetic response, then it's not a restful activity and it's adding to the total load, including your training. If, on the other hand, the work that you do is actually fun and you enjoy it, and by the end of the day you actually feel good, then that work can actually be contributing to the quality of your rest. What I'm getting at here is the question of should you do something in your rest day is not so much dependent on what that activity is, but it's how you respond to it that's really important. So the opposite of a stress or a sympathetic nervous system response is the parasympathetic nervous system being activated. That is the catchphrase that characterizes the parasympathetic is rest and digest. Classic activities that are designed to activate this system are things like yoga, meditation, sleep, time in nature, like I'm doing right now. And in the Western world, I think it's fair to say that it's a sympathetic dominant setup that we have. Coming back to that question about stretching and should you do it on a rest day, if you're stretching for the flexibility training, do it on a rest day, do it on a training day, do it whenever it fits in. I don't think it matters. But if the stretching section is part of your parasympathetic activation, it's actually a restful activity that allows you to detach from life stresses, then yes, it's absolutely a valuable part of a rest day. Does that mean that everyone needs to do stretching on a rest day? Absolutely not. You may well have many other ways to get to the same place, many other activities that do exactly the same thing, like I'm doing right now. Particularly nice for me because I haven't seen sunshine on my face for about 6 weeks. It's absolutely wonderful. One moment, one more fence to go. So I enjoy almost all of the work activities I do, which are mostly sitting at a computer. I work from home, so I can kind of control the environment a little bit. It's quite a nice place to work. I enjoy the work itself. You know, lately I've been working on a book. I've been writing a course on movement technique for climbers, more about that quite soon. And I've been doing lots of video editing as usual. I enjoy all of those things. But if I do them for too long, then it definitely comes at a cost. So even though I enjoy it, I still have to balance it. And just doing what I'm doing right now, coming out for 30 minutes, being outside, that goes a long way to balancing it. Doing those activities, although they can feel peripheral to hardcore training, they're not. They're directly influence the size of the gains that you'll actually have from your subsequent training session that you'll do tomorrow. Yeah, just a bit of cloud over the mountains there, so I don't think I'm going to see anything. So possibly I might just walk home. So just to finish off, I should say that there are a couple of things that are universal in rest and rest days. Good food and good sleep are essential parts of everybody's rest day. And if you compromise on those, then you will pay a price for it in your training. But beyond that, the activities that you do on your rest day there's a lot of flexibility in them. They're kind of down to you. You should do what feels renewing to you personally and what fits into your lifestyle. So if that's yoga, meditation, walking, sitting on the couch, spending time with family, or even working, then if that works for you, then keep doing it. If you're resting today, hope you enjoy your rest day, and we'll see you in the next episode if you're subscribed to the channel.